So the Treasury this week circulated this graphic with the claim that the UK has grown faster than any other major European economy since 2010. This slightly surprised me, as for more than a decade UK growth has been really disappointing. In some of my recent videos, I've highlighted where the government has distorted the truth. Perhaps I've even been too cautious, they've lied. So I was a little bit sceptical and decided to check the government's claim. I couldn't find anywhere where the government provided the data behind the claim, but the source of the OECD data used is identified. So I delved into the OECD database. There's a lot of data in there, but I did find what I think is the data set that it's based on. And guess what? It's actually right. Maybe this government hasn't done so bad after all. There we are, top of the European League. But just hold on, we know this government well. So let's just dig into this a little bit more. This is the full data set that the government's social media graph was based on. It's based on an index so that we can directly compare how each of these three economies has grown. It doesn't look too bad for the UK looking at this, as seen by the red line. The UK has generally kept up with Germany since 2010, but then has overtaken it in the past 2 years. The UK was slower recovering from COVID, but now seems to be growing faster than the German economy, and clearly the French economy too. We can see that UK growth is only a bit higher than Germany over the past 2 years. So let's just pause for a minute to consider how well the German economy is actually doing. As I was preparing this video, I just Googled German economy, and these are the top news stories that came up. Germany is actually doing really badly. When we include the same data set for the US and the OECD countries as a whole, we see a different picture. The average for the 38 OECD developed and industrialised economies is significantly above that of the UK. Of course, the UK, France and Germany are included in the OECD figure, so it means that the other countries are doing significantly better. The US has had much better growth than Europe too. So in terms of GDP growth, we can acknowledge that the UK has done better than Germany and France. But the EU economies as a whole have very modest growth in the past decade. When we start comparing with other countries, we can see that the UK growth performance is nothing to be shouting about. It's like going to the Olympics and not winning one of the medals, but pointing out the competitors that we beat, without mentioning any of the people that beat us. There's one other way in which we can see that for the same 10-year period heralded by the Treasury. The trend pre and post-COVID are very different. The solid red line plots the UK GDP trend for 2010 to the end of 2019, just before the pandemic. If it had continued at the same rate, the dotted line shows where growth would be. Comparing this with the US, we can see that the US economy has managed to return to a pre-pandemic performance. The social media posts say that the UK is on the up. This is true when compared with the badly performing European economies. However, when compared with the US, it makes it look like the UK economy has been flatlining for the past 2 years. The government's policies for economic growth are so flawed. They're actually focused on an obsession in reducing taxes. I'm doing a separate video on the government's tax and spending policy, but the evidence is that tax cuts do not affect growth. With interest rates likely to remain high for the relative future, there's no prospects that growth is suddenly going to take off. In conclusion, while the Treasury's graphic highlighting the UK's growth compared to other major European economies since 2010 presents a seemingly positive narrative, a deeper analysis reveals a different reality. While the UK has outperformed Germany and France in recent years, a fact that shouldn't be disregarded, when the scope of comparison is widened to include the broader OECD countries and the US, the UK's relative performance is significantly less remarkable. It's not quite dishonesty this time, but it is only presenting half of the picture. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.